It also stick out because it's like in the beginning of the season, whereas if this is 40 games in, that number doesn't matter in the grand.
No, I think it would stick out no matter what because we got so much attention on this thing. It's not a big deal, though. You just got to play through it. And because if you start doubting yourself, shoot, that's when you're trouble.
Through the first 6 games of this young season, the Warriors have at times looked very good, but have also been stung by 2 losses, something that hadn't happened to them last season until December 30th. And while many may remember Klay Thompson getting off to a slow start last year, it is really nothing compared to what's happening now. Through 6 games last year, Klay was at a respectable 36% from downtown, while this year he's just below 20%. So let's dig deep into the footage to see what is happening on his shots and what might be causing so many misses, both the tough contested kind and the check the win with your thumb wide open shots. One of the keys to shooting the basketball is rhythm. When the body moves smoothly through its mechanics, you increase the chances of making the shot significantly. And there have been moments where you can see Klay struggle to achieve this. On this catch, there is a slight hesitation. Perhaps he didn't catch it cleanly, and as a result, he struggles to get his shot off before AD can contest this into a miss. Another example is this sidestep, and after the dribble, rather than just go straight up into his shot, there is a pause, perhaps again to get a better grip on the ball, but it interrupts the energy and flow. Again off the dribble, he pauses just for a split second while trying to get the ball in the right spot, and it's definitely interrupting the flow. On this catch and shoot, he plants the right foot ready to go up with it, but then has to replant before starting the shot. This is almost indecision on his part, which seems crazy to think Klay would ever have to think before shooting. Another issue I'm seeing is with his feet. Here you can see the interrupted rhythm again, but also his feet are too wide when shooting this. When you watch a lot of his makes, you see that he prefers to have his feet about shoulder width apart, maybe a little wider, for optimal energy transfer from legs into the shot. However, on some of the shots this year, he's been getting caught with his feet outside his shoulders, reducing the amount of power generated and leaving them short. Check how his feet are narrower when loading into his shot, and notice now his feet stay parallel the whole time as they sway forward into the shot, which barely misses. Sometimes the pass doesn't help, which is all the more reason why you've got to get your feet set properly. Here, his right foot is again outside his shoulder too much, and the shot is off just a few inches. And it's not to say he can't make shots if his feet are wide, since this one is a good example of happy feet, but wider than normal, and yet he splashed this thing clean through the net. And the one game he shot well versus OKC, his feet seemed just a little bit closer together, giving him a more solid base to start from. So sports fans, while I'm talking about Klay Thompson and what he's doing on the court and why he might or might not be missing these shots, I wanted to bring in another expert, NBA skills coach Drew Hanlen of Pure Sweat Basketball and a buddy of mine. And Drew, thanks for coming on the show and hopping in here for a few minutes. So we're talking about Klay, we're talking about his footwork, we're talking about rhythm. What are you seeing about Klay Thompson's shooting that might indicate to you that he's either going to just really quickly take off here, or maybe he's having some issues that he needs to correct?
First off, I think he's such a good shooter, and his form is probably the best in the league as far as mechanic go, that I think that he's going to bounce back out of this really quick. I think that part of it is the adjusting to the green light, if you will. You know, now Kevin Durant came in. It's a different flow, and he's getting different shots. And so anytime you have a new offense, a new coach, anything like that, those factors always kind of add up. So the first thing I would say is I think he's just not getting the same shots, or maybe he's not getting as many shots, so he's not getting as much rhythm, which is important. You know, if you know that the ball's coming to you in certain spots and you can get your feet in certain rhythms, then you can feel more comfortable. I think right now he's still feeling it out, but I think that, over the course of, 10 more games, I think we'll see his shooting percentages jump up to around the 40%, which I think will end the season around.
Yeah, I had predicted earlier in the season, or before it started, that he might actually lead the team in scoring, because it felt like to me, looking at them practice, that they would probably end up he would get the most easy shots. And there's no question he's been getting a ton of easy shots. Even now, he's just not going down for whatever reason. So you have some ideas and some numbers, I think, that would explain or certainly give us insight into what he does the most or how he ends up finishing with his feet. So can you give us an idea, even talking about 1-2 versus the hop, and maybe even last year, what that looked like and how that plays out for him?
Yeah, as you know, every shooter shoots a different way, and so it's important to understand what each player does so that we can ultimately reverse engineer it and see what they're not doing to make shots. And so I have his numbers from last year. I know that you've done some numbers for this year, but his numbers for last year, when his feet stayed, his balance is one of the best in the league. He keeps his feet wide and he doesn't really change angle much. So when his feet stayed wide and he stayed squared, and when I say squared, I think it's important, me and you have talked about this before, people think we're disagreeing, but we're actually on the same page. Staying square does not mean starting at 12 o'clock and landing at 12 o'clock. He doesn't do that. He starts at around 10:30 or 11 o'clock, but he lands at 10:30 and 11 o'clock a lot of times with a little bit of a jump forward most of the time as well. When he did that last season, he was 241 out of 426, which means 57% overall when he basically kept his feet wide and stayed at the same angle. So if he started at 11 o'clock, he landed at 11 o'clock. Regardless if he jumped forward or straight up and down, it doesn't matter. As long as the feet stayed parallel and stayed on that same angle line, then he shot 57% outside of 12 feet, which is unbelievable, obviously. Another thing that he did was when his feet stayed wide, but he twisted and turned, he shot 80 of those. He was 23 for 80, which means his numbers dropped down to 29%. So think about that. When he turned, instead of going from 11 o'clock to 11 o'clock, if he went from 11 o'clock to 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, his numbers jumped down from 57% to 29%, which means that he is not a twist shooter, which is funny because one of his best friends, the other half of the Splash brother, is a huge twist shooter, which shows you that it's all about what you do most. When his feet land together last season, which he wasn't very good at, he shot 10%. So when his feet come together, he's absolutely terrible. And then he had 1 foot landing, both controlled and uncontrolled. But when he did the 1 foot landing, he was 17 for 59 total. So if you think about that, his 1 foot landing is not very good at all. Again, that's around 27%, which is not something we like. And then when he did his split step landing, which means if their feet were here and say they started parallel and then 1 foot came in front of the other one, so instead of having them both turn or both go forward, 1 foot came forward and they landed. He shot 109 of those last year, believe it or not, which is a lot of shots, but he was 18 for 109. So if you think about that, he only shot 16.5% when he did a split landing. For Klay Thompson, it's all about balance. Everybody has their different things. For Steph Curry, if you look, it's probably his follow-through because his feet are all over the place, but his follow-through is consistent. For Klay Thompson, it all comes down to balance, and I think that that's why he's been struggling so far this season.
When you say feet wide, I just want to make sure, you're probably saying something like shoulder width apart, not anything wider than that, right?
He's actually a little bit beyond shoulder width, which is actually wider than most. I haven't seen many shooters that are really that wide. Him and Kyle Korver are pretty much the two widest good shooters, if you will. But he's right at or right outside of shoulder width. And the problem is he just hasn't been getting his base set and keeping it set this season so far.
Right. Well, I think that's a matter of just getting in the gym with reps. I'm not even sure you need to point that out to him, right? Because it feels like guys at that level, their bodies will just teach themselves after, in practice, what's happening, and they can kind of find it rather than have to do any kind of scientific, manipulation with other people staring at them, right?
Yeah. And another thing that I know, and I know we talked about this before we hopped on, but one of the things that actually really surprised me was last season, say in his best category, which was his feet stay wide and squared, which means stay at the same angle. When he was highly contested, he was 77 makes, 32 misses, which makes 71% of the time he made it when he was highly contested, but kept his balance perfect. When he was somewhat contested, it went down to 53%. And then when it was wide open, like uncontested, nobody within 3 feet of him, he shot 48%, which means maybe he is getting better shots, but he actually knocks down more shots. At least last season, he was way better when he was contested. I don't know if that means he's locking in or what happens, but a lot of times players that have that effect where they're making more shots when they're contested, it really means that when they're open, they just lose discipline and end up just, they think they're, I know I'm going to do this, and they end up rushing their process and don't lock in on their mechanics like they do when they are highly contested and have to get off their shot in a split second.
Sure, and it also sounds like Klay does struggle with focus at times, and so that could also be what you're saying. That locked-in notion is forced upon them, and when it's not there, they don't find it as easily. I think J.R. Smith must be very similar to that as well, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that a lot of the shooters, I was at the Lakers-Warriors game the other night when Steph Curry went 0 for 10. It was the first game in 150 games or something like that he hadn't made 3. And he actually had a lot of good wide open looks. But what happens is you end up just pushing them at the rim instead of locking in, getting your legs into it, getting your hips into it, getting that good flow that's important. You end up just kind of short-arming it or just kind of rushing through the steps instead of locking in and doing exactly what you have to. The good news for Klay is he's only a couple games in the season. One big night where he goes 7 for 9, jumps up his percentages back to a normal number, and then from there I think we'll see him shoot around 40% for the rest of the season.
Sure. Now we did see him go 4 for 8 versus OKC, which thought that might have been it, but then he kind of regressed again, so we'll have to find out what's going to happen here. But great stuff, really exciting and interesting numbers that you provided for us. So I can't thank you for coming on and giving us this insight. It's been great.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on again.
You got it. We'll talk to you soon. Another interesting thing I'm noticing is what happens with his legs on the way down. Of course, you might argue that this doesn't matter since the ball's already released, but it's without a doubt a symptom of his issues during the shot, and his body is telling us he's trying to compensate. On some of his misses, he's been kicking the right foot out in front. While this makes sense while you're shooting on the move to your right, it shouldn't happen on a standstill spot-up shot. His body is definitely telling him he's not getting the proper alignment, and it's trying to adjust after the fact by kicking his right leg across his body. Shooting from distance can be a matter of inches, and all the more reason why you need to have everything working in concert perfectly. Watch his body twist and leg kick out on this corner 3, and while that was extreme, the ball misses by half an inch. The other interesting leg thing he's been doing is what I call parachuting, when both legs float away from each other on the way down. This could be a myriad of things. Perhaps he's trying to draw contact from the defender, or he's worried he'll land on the defender's foot, but this is definitely a red flag that his mechanics are off, and all it takes is the slightest change to get into a prolonged funk. And notice on this shot how his feet begin to drift apart just before he lands. In comparison, notice how his feet stay parallel the whole way through the shot till he lands, giving him the best chance of success from beyond the arc. But on occasion, he's been letting that right foot drift out wide, and it's certainly caught my eye as something abnormal about his mechanics. Of course, when going to your right, letting your right foot kick forward is a good idea to control the amount of turn in the air, but Klay normally doesn't even do that as much. So in the end, do these things really matter? Or is it just a matter of time till the basketball gods decide that Klay should return to normal? Certainly, shooting mechanics are important no matter how small the sample size, and if there is a lack of consistency, it can lead to prolonged slumps. I suspect having Kevin Durant in the lineup has changed the rhythm of the offense to some degree, but the shots he's getting look similar in style and context to the shots he had been getting in years past. So keep your eye on his feet going forward and see if anything changes as he inevitably heats up over the rest of the year.